Well, hey, everybody, and welcome back to our Entrepreneur Spotlight. And today I have a very dear friend of mine, a guy who I've watched his career path over the last 15 plus years and watch him grow. And I think his story is a great story. It's a great story about the way that he's poured into people. It's a great story because of the individual he is. And I think that his business journey is also very interesting. And I think people will be able to learn a lot from our talk today. So what's up, my brother? It's good to see you, man.
It's great to be here, and been watching this for a little while now, and just love what y'all are doing, and of course that you're doing it, and been watching your journey for a long time too, and it's very inspirational.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, man, and just and then we'll get into it.
Sure, absolutely. I don't know how far you want me to go back.
Yeah, just a brief intro, man, and then we'll get into kind of unpacking all this stuff, dude. Yeah.
Sure. So, born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. Grew up in New Orleans East. My mom and dad are from there, and my grandparents are from there as well. And my grandpa was a baseball coach and athletic director at a school in New Orleans for a long time. It's where I went to elementary school, and my dad was the youngest of four boys, and they all played high school, college football. One of my uncles played NFL ball, and then my uncle on my mom's side, he played baseball. So kind of grew up in this athletic family, born to very young parents. So which is kind of neat because we're a little closer in age and have a great relationship. And it was kind of neat watching them, cut their teeth in not only as parents but also in the business world too, and had a lot of influence on my life. And growing up Roman Catholic, I'm a Christian. And so went to Jesuit High School in New Orleans, went to Kansas State on a full football scholarship, and after a couple of years transferred back to Tulane on a full football scholarship. And so Sean and I both, you and I obviously played in the Catholic League. You went to Brother Martin,
yep.
And then Tulane as well, which is where you played, which somebody brought up that interception against LSU the other day, and brought up the video and everything. But did that, always knew what I wanted to do since I was 12 years old, which was, be in the health, wellness, fitness, performance, and nutrition industry. My goal back then in high school was to build this sports performance facility and train all these athletes, which I was able to do. I didn't build the massive facility. Thankfully, I didn't do that, and I can give you the reasons behind that. But had programs all over the New Orleans metro area in the sports performance world, and was able to really live out my dream. I'm still doing that. It just looks a little bit different and feels a little different, but it's still one and the same mission, which is just to help as many people as I can with the gifts that God's blessed me with, and just ask Him every day to continue to instill in me the vigor to keep pursuing, the latest and greatest in health, wellness, fitness, performance, and nutrition. And I'm married for 16 years now, have a son who's 12 years old, and, they're both the joy of my life. And, I love nothing more than family, friends, working with the people that I work with who become like family, and are great friends to me. And so that's a brief little catch up.
Well, yeah, and listen, I've got firsthand experience with you. I entrusted both of my boys with you to train. You were kind of the first person with Sean Jr. that I was like, you know what? I watched you at the gym and I saw the way that you operated, and I'm like, man, I really like, you were very firm with the kids, but you could tell, man, you loved them and you just poured a lot into them. And when you were there for those training sessions, like, man, they were all that mattered at that point, man. And you paid attention to each individual, and I'd go jump in those classes with you sometimes too. And man, like, I didn't get a break. I was old and the kids were young, but it didn't matter, dude. You were pushing the old guys just as hard as the young guys. And you've trained multiple good friends of mine, and I've watched you over the years, and I just always admired the way that you stuck to your mission, man. Like, you woke up every day. I used to notice this about you with a game plan, man, and you'd be in the gym, and then you'd have a car. Back then, you had your car filled with equipment, and like, you were leaving the gym, and it was always like a dead sprint, almost like you were going to the next thing, dude. So I was like, man, this guy really has figured this out, dude. And he is literally maximizing all of his time. And the way that you poured into the kids, it was a reflection of who you were, man. And so I've followed you for a long time, man, and watched how your business has grown. And you've gone from training at a gym, building up just an incredible business. And those things, I guess, were the catalyst for you to continue on this journey. And I think it started with you at 12 years old. You knew what you wanted to do. How did, where did that come from at 12 years old? Like, how did you know you wanted to be in this industry, dude? That's really young to be thinking. It doesn't surprise me because you seem like you're wise beyond your years. You're very, reserved in the way that you speak, and you're known as a very honest and trustworthy person in our community, And so at 12 years old, what did you see from your parents and what did you see out there that made you want to go down this path?
Well, so when I was born, my dad was playing football at Tulane.
Okay.
He had signed a full scholarship out of high school at Jesuit to go to Tulane, and so if you're local, there's a guy named Mackie Shilstone. He actually trains Serena Williams. So if you're not local, he trains Roy Jones Jr. When I was at Tulane,
I remember Michael Spinks for the Tyson fight. He trained him at Tulane, actually.
Yeah, they're running around the track, with their just all covered up and everything, and. So my dad was actually being trained by Mackie at the time, and so Mackie had them all like drinking Shackley shakes and vitamins and things like that. So, from the time I can literally remember, I've been drinking Shackley protein shakes, back then, taking the kids' multivitamin chewables, those things, and I'm watching my dad, go to the track, and I'm going with him. I mean, I was literally a sidekick, kind of like Colt is with me, my son. And I watched him in the gym training his butt off like an animal, in there and doing the things that Mackie taught him, living it at home, nutrition in the way that Mackie taught him. And so my mom was kind of along for that ride too. And so I always asked my dad, like, Dad, when can I go lift with you? He's like, son, when you're 12 years old. There's always this thought that, it would stunt your growth. And I can go into that later about what I now think about kids working and training through those younger ages. But he said push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups. He said, and then when you're 12 years old, I'll take you to lift. And and I played baseball, football, basketball, soccer. I played it all when I was a kid.
So was Mackie training your dad at Tulane?
He was.
Yeah, I remember, dude. Just talking about that when Benny signed with Tulane in '81, the summer before he went to school. I used to go to Tulane and work out with him. They had that real crappy gym, and I remember Mackie was fairly early in his career, and he'd come over there and he would deliver these baggies of supplements and pills that for these kids to take, dude. And that was my first intro to Mackie. I guess that was kind of in the beginning. He was starting to be a pretty well-known name, but then I think it was in the beginning of his career, dude. So that's interesting that this was even pre that when you guys your dad was working with Mackie.
Yeah, and I think at the time he was actually volunteering his time to Tulane. At some point he got hired.
Yeah, I think that's what he was doing there. He was kind of it was almost like the football players were his guinea pigs almost, and he was testing these theories that he had about nutrition on them.
Yeah, and then I think he also got his MBA from Tulane, so he kind of married the two, exercise physiology, the nutrition piece, and then obviously the business piece, which he's such a great businessman. But I'm glad you said guinea pig because that also brought up another thing. I watched my dad when he was at Tulane. So he's working with Mackie, got all these things going on. And so he also went to a chiropractor, and my mom and dad didn't have a lot. My dad worked 3 jobs. He worked through the night. So I see his grit. I see his work ethic, right? I see all those things. Like he was barely home, but he would come meet us for dinner, and he'd go back and he'd work these other few jobs while he was on scholarship at Tulane, while he was pursuing an engineering degree. Wow. But he also would go to Dr. Sachs, who is a chiropractor, and Dr. Lynn, and they were doing a lot of research in the kinesiological world, where, if we can align the structure but also align the bite, how each tooth corresponds to an organ, the meridians, and then also the musculature, vitamins and minerals do the same thing. So there's a kinesiological chart. In fact, Dr. Sachs diagnosed my sister as having a citrus allergy, and the medical doctors couldn't figure it out. And there's kinesiological testing where he tested my sister through my mom, and that's how you had to test kids, and figured out that my sister had a citrus allergy, and she loved oranges even though she was highly allergic. We didn't know at the time. She kept eating them, and that's what was making her sick. So there was that component too to this holistic approach to health. And so I grew up in that. And so my dad saying, hey, look, when you're 12 years old, I'll take you to work out. Well, I can remember I was January 12th, my birthday. January 11th, before I turned 12 years old, I said, Dad, you know what tomorrow is, right? He says, yeah, it's your birthday. And I said, you know what tomorrow is, though, right? He says, it's your birthday. And I said, we're going to go to Franco's and work out, right? And that's our local gym here that we've gone to for years. And he just looked at me and smiled, and he said, yeah. I said, you said my 12th birthday. I said, it's time. And so he took me to, I'll back up, he had a career-ending injury in the weight room when he was at Tulane. That's part of the reason he didn't want me to lift till I was 12. He wanted to make sure I was doing it right. And so, L5, S1 blew out when he was doing a squat with like 650 for 2. They didn't have racks like they do now, so he had guys on each side, and he just went forward probably a couple centimeters too far.
And boom.
Quarter inch, boom, blew it out. So so he takes me at 12. We get it. It's good. It was good for him at the time, got him back in the weight room, and he taught me the basics. He taught me how to squat, how to bench, taught me how to power clean, those things. And then from there, it was just like this. He birthed an animal at that point, because I loved it already, having not even done it. And then when he took me in there, that was it. And at 12 years old, I was just like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people in this area. I'm going to try to fill my brain. And that was before internet and everything else. I'm going to try to research as much as I can to implement with myself. I'm my best guinea pig. And then it just grew from there.
Wow, dude. Yeah, because I can remember when I first met you, and like kids would come to you and be like, man, this is going on. And I remember it so vividly that you were able to almost diagnose things, but it was like you couldn't see it, but you just knew it, right? It's like only somebody with a lot of knowledge could know something like this, because you're like, oh, this is hurting me. But then you'd be like, well, this is connected to this, and this is connected to this, and you might be doing this. And so you weren't just training people, man. Like you were almost giving, like, not medical advice, but you understood it. And I was like, I remember asking you one day, how did you know all this stuff, man? He said, well, this is what I studied at Tulane. You understand the body works a certain way, and what we put in it and the movements that we make, they're all tied to each other. And so, yeah, so you were way ahead of this sports performance thing, man, like really early on, before it became a big thing, or right when it was becoming a big thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I can only take credit for my mentors and the people in my life. It started with my parents, based on where I was immersed in their life and what was going on, with my dad up to that point. Once I got to 12 years old, and then I get to Jesuit, I had some really good coaches. Jay Pittman, Brother Martin Guy.
Yep.
He's a longtime family friend, so our parents go way back. My mom and his wife went to beauty school together, and so we kind of grew up together. But he graduated from UNO and in exercise physiology. He was very astute and very intelligent when it came to those things and the workouts he would write. And so every coach, starting with him, I would pick their brains. Why are we doing this? Why are you doing this way? And then right before my senior year, we had Coach Robert Toomer. He played football at LSU. He was a running back for him and broke all Herschel Walker's high school records in Georgia. The guy was awesome, and he became one of my best friends. But he was great, and so picking his brain too, just getting out of LSU, having his first job at Jesuit, and really just asking him and him teaching me. And all my coaches were always so open. So when I signed a scholarship with Kansas State, I literally went there right out of high school to train. Like I loved, I trained for the game, but I trained also because of how much I loved it, and I almost loved training more than I loved the game. Mm-hmm. And the game of training also, and people's thought processes behind it. So yeah, it came in on the forefront of this whole movement of sports performance training, which came from the Eastern Europeans, started to trickle into the United States because we saw what they were doing at an international level and us trying to compete with that. Mm-hmm. So that was then started to be implemented. But when I went to Kansas State, Coach Rod Cole, he was the National Strength Coach of the Year, 2 or 3 years in a row. And so when I went in there and his staff, Coach Mark Oberchrome and those guys, I remember sitting in the office with them. They said, what are your goals? And it was the first time I think somebody sat me down and really asked me my goals as it pertained to performance. So we went through those, and I just said, guys, I just want to ask y'all, I don't want to be aggravating. I don't want to make your job harder than it is or put more on you, than you need to have on you. But this is what I want to do. What y'all are doing right now is what I want to do the rest of my life. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but would you mind if I ask questions and really pick y'all's brain as to the whys and the hows of what we're doing and the science behind it? And absolutely not, And then my strength coaches at Tulane, it was the same thing. And I think really having two of the best exercise physiology, exercise science programs in the nation. I mean, one of my professors, who was the department head at Kansas State, wrote a ton of the exercise physiology textbooks, the one that we actually used at Tulane. He was one of the co-authors of that, and then at Tulane as well. One thing that I wouldn't have got at Kansas State was we actually worked in cadaver labs. And so, for 2 years I was in a cadaver lab, and then I actually taught the pre-med students the summer before I graduated. And that right there really brought like the biomechanical piece, the physiological piece all together for me. to be honest with you, I was failing the first semester that I took anatomy and physiology, my lab, because when I walked in and I saw the cadavers, it really freaked me out. And then I had a teacher call me in and say, "What's going on with your grade? Why are you, not doing well in this class?" And I was like, honestly, I can't bring myself to go. I can't get past the bodies on the table. And she said,
that's got to be strange, huh, man?
It was for a first timer. And so she just explained, she said, look, you have to look at this as science. Like, these people literally have donated their bodies so that we can uncover what's underneath the skin, and we can have a better, viewpoint of what things look like and why they interact the way they do, and to see the anomalies and things like that. And so that really opened me up. After that, I was in class, I was immersed in it, got great grades in it at that point. But it was a little scary at first seeing that.
I bet, man. Yeah. Well, that unpacks a little bit about how you just knew how everything worked, man. When I first met you, like I was saying earlier, you were like able to diagnose people like right on the spot, dude, just by asking a few questions, or pointing to certain parts, what's going on, and you were able to like unpack, oh, it's going this, and you're doing this, and you're not doing this, and you need more of this. And I was like, damn, that's amazing, dude. How does this guy know this stuff, dude? He's not a doctor, but this explains it,
Yeah, that was it. People would ask me sometimes, well, how do you know this or that? And I'm like, look, I'm pulling from different files from throughout my lifetime up to this point, which is kind of what I always prayed that God would have me do. Like, just use me as an instrument and just work through me, with whatever knowledge you've given me and bless me with. And so, MarketingBox, right? It's like when I look at someone, biomechanically, you're kind of looking at them in this box, right? And you're watching them move, and you're listening to the feedback they give you on a daily basis. And then they come to you with a certain issue, and you're like, well, yeah, you feel it in your hip, but it may be because of your foot, right? And you start to kind of look at different things and understand how the body isn't just, a lot of times we tend to look at things in this one little box rather than getting outside the box and looking at the whole organism and really what's going on. I mean, for instance, just stress in general, right? Like, if you try to take kids, athletes of all levels, pro level all the way down, I'll say really like, college athletes, high school athletes who are, taking exams and things like that, you can't put them through these rigorous workouts during like exam week because there's this extra stress on their body, so it's little things like that, and knowing how to shift things, and you have to be able to be fluid. So, like I might have a 2-month, macro cycle, if you will, written for you, but if you come in one day and give me certain feedback as a coach, I have to be pliable enough to say, you know what, we're going to just take this for the day and move it over here, and this is what we need to do today because this is the feedback you're giving me, And so it's just kind of looking at things a little bit different rather than like, looking at people through this microscope. It's kind of opening it up to see them and look at them and really help them in whatever way you can.
Yeah. So from your perspective, we were talking a little bit earlier before we got on air, about the way that the science has changed, through these times. So I would imagine you've been at this for how many years? 16, 17 years?
About 20 now, yeah.
20 years. And so, go back 20 years and today, like, things have changed a tremendous amount, right? So, are there certain things that you've followed, or how have you kind of kept up with the current thing, because, man, it's not yesterday's advice, you look up, and sometimes today it's not really the best advice based on where the science is going in some cases. So have you had to deal with any of that stuff, or the things that you always preach, they've been really evergreen, as far as you know?
No, it's a constant evolution. So obviously there's a foundation of research. There's a foundation of research in exercise science and exercise physiology and, physiology as a whole. Mm-hmm. But it's how the art and science, right? So the science is, here's what it is. The art is how you apply that science to each individual. And everybody's different. So it's not a one-size-fits-all for everybody. And whether you're training people in groups or you're trying to give advice to a group about nutrition or recovery or something like that, you always have to say, look, this is going to be applied to everybody a little bit differently, mm-hmm. right? Eat the fish, spit out the bones, like know what applies to you. And, if you need help with that, of course, that's where coaching obviously comes in. But there's been a big evolution. And I think a turning point for me and kind of my thinking in that evolution was, if you think about back in, the late 90s, like when I was in high school and they were, those things like creatine came out, and they're talking about amino acids and all these other things. What we now see is that not only is that, and it makes sense, right? It's like it's performance enhancing, but it's also anti-aging. So those things back then, like just one example, for instance, is like creatine, right? There are other certain substances and things like that that help with mitochondrial health and, production of ATP, which is, energy at the cellular level and those kind of things. But also as medicine and physiology, and I think the naturopathic end of things have evolved, it has also shown us that those things that are performance enhancing are also anti-aging, right? They help to keep us young as well. And so as I've started to age as well and kind of getting older and looking at that, it's always been part of my research, part of my studies and things like that. But I'm now on that end too, like people talk about biohacking and doing all these different things, right? Cold, hot therapy, a ton of, meditation. I mean, all those things, like they've been around for years and years. It's just that people are now starting to kind of wake up and be open-minded enough to say, okay, well, let me try a little bit of that. Let me see how that helps me.
Yeah.
I mean, the training world, the things that you brought up earlier, knees over toes, things like, oh, that's going to put tons of stress on the patella tendon and, all that. But it's like, and I remember having a discussion with somebody at some point just about that in general, where, I was like, oh, you don't want your knees over your toes. Well, I'm never going to teach somebody to necessarily do a back squat like that. There's sissy squats and all kinds of things. And I remember Vern Gambella, I believe was his name, but he coached the U.S. national soccer team, I think the women's team at some point, and he kind of had that same theory. He would bring up a picture, and it was like the knee over the toe, and he's like, well, when you're on the field, this is going to happen, so why not train it as well?
Exactly.
So it's kind of gone, I think, from like the basics of like squat, clean, deadlift, those kind of things, and it's evolved more to also functionality.
Yes. Yeah, and especially for old people like me, man, what I've found with some of this newer science is, I had bad knees, bad shoulders, and using, just paying attention to some of this stuff, following what the experts are saying. I follow you, and it's helped. It almost is like a fountain of youth when you start to discover this stuff, the cold and hot treatments, learning what that does to the body as a prohibiting cancer because of the way our cells are organized. And when you put yourself in those chaotic, really hot or really cold, your cells become totally disorganized, and cancer can't grow in those type of environments and stuff, So just learning all these little tricks that are out there for people, that's what I've found, man. It's almost like you can discover the fountain of youth, man. Like your performance, it's almost like age is. I saw this the other day posted by somebody, a really well-respected Huberman. Age is a disease, and diseases can be cured, and so. You don't have to do it the way that people always did. You don't have to get older and then this is just what your life is. I think you can cheat that if you start to pay attention to some of these things from a physical standpoint, and just a lot of it's not even physical. It's just knowing these little tricks and tips that are going to preserve your youthfulness, dude, and your ability to go compete. Because listen, what I've realized in my age is that there's a couple of things that keep you youthful. And one of those things is competing, right? Where there's a scoreboard and there's a win and there's a loss. That does something and invigorates somebody back to their youth, right? And I think you get older and people stop competing. And I think that's a real problem. And the second thing is ideas. If you're still dreaming and having ideas, man, you keep that kind of youthful spirit about you. And so, man, I've noticed by leaning into those things, competing, putting a real deadline or a real win or loss, and you got to go do that. You start to not do that when you get out of competitive sports, right? You lose that edge, and man, that edge keeps you in a different place, and it really keeps you in your youthful kind of state, man. So the mindset of things, I know you've always been big on the mindset, the way that you think about things, the way you prepare for your day, the way that you analyze, what's in front of you and how you use your spiritual life to kind of make sure that your mental and emotional being is always, because that's the other thing, man. You always had a great word for the kids. You always had an encouraging word. You always were coaching them about life while you were coaching them physically. And I know that's been a big part of your journey. And, it's kind of put you in a position when the opportunity presented itself to really take your business to the next level. And, so talk a little bit about the mindset. I know that you were super like determined, but like, what is a typical routine that Brandt Quick gets up? Let's unpack your typical day for you and the way that you prepare for your day, because I know this is what I know. Every day that you wake up and your feet hit the ground, you're ready to go seize the day. Carpe diem, man. I know that that's the way that you live. So maybe, I think it would be helpful for people to understand, a lot of times people need instructions, man, to get going. I've become self-aware, you're self-aware, and so you do those things, but people don't know where to get started, man. And so maybe unpack a little bit about what's a typical day and how do you prepare for your day? How do you prepare for your month? How do you prepare for the next year? And how does that go into making you the successful human that you are?
Sure. Well, I think it's John Dryden. He says, first we make our habits, then our habits make us.
Yep.
And discipline is key. The disciplines in your life and in movement, in getting outside, in your spiritual disciplines, all those things are so important. Even the discipline of personal growth and development and being emotionally intelligent and aware and agile in our relationships as well. It's been something that's been big, in the last few years for me, as I come from a Sicilian, hot-tempered family as well, and that's how I was raised. So I find that the best thing, and this has changed for me a little bit in the last, I'd say, 2 to 4 years, as you know, but because I have more time now to where I can spend more time exactly where I want to spend it and where I know it's going to be very fruitful and not selfishly. You can't pour from an empty cup. And so, when you're taking care of you, you're able to serve mankind at a greater level, whether that be, in your family unit or your sphere of influence or even at a greater level, doing things like this. So that being said, I now, like, my days, what I do is I wake up. I do not set an alarm anymore, although I very rarely needed one for the last 20 years. When I was in college, I was getting up anywhere between 6:30 and 7:30, and especially like my junior, senior year, where I'd get up, I'd go, train, and that was a habit that I would do repeatedly. But now, not setting that alarm, I wake up, and I generally wake up probably the same time as I have for the last 20 years, although certain times in the year, I give my body rest when it says rest. Mm-hmm. But the first thing I do when I wake up is my feet hit the ground, and I go get on my mat, and I pray, and I meditate. First thing I do. And that just sets the whole day straight. I lead a men's group on Wednesday morning, and we were actually talking this morning, about that, and that, our egos are always like, and this is my mind when I first wake up is, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. And so by getting on my mat and by getting, and I'll do some yoga sometimes it's just literally prayer and meditation still. Seated cross-legged on my back, whatever it is. Sometimes I'm going to do a little bit of stretching with that and a little bit of yoga too, which is the same thing. I'm just moving, while I'm doing it. And that's a big part of my life too, obviously movement. But, with that just sets the foundation for the day because, especially if you're in the Word, it helps to really correct your conscience to where, like this morning, it's not about me, right? There are people in my family, there are people in my circle who need prayers and who need intention, on their life as well. And they need healing hands on their life or their soul or whatever it may be, their families. And so it helps to just, course correct you. And so that lays the foundation for my day. After that, it's generally some sort of reading. It's been the Word more than anything else as of late, although, like right now I'm reading Life Force by Tony Robbins, which is, it's really encouraging on one hand, it's very scary on the other.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the things that they can do with that. But that's usually what I do first. And then, from there, I set up some things like what message do I want to deliver today, to the people that are following me and what do I want to fill my brain with. And then, so I'm usually up way before my family. And then some days I'm out the door before they wake up. Some days like this morning, I'm able to now wake up with my son and my wife and kind of help in the mornings. I was able to bring him to school today. And while I was, for the first probably 9 years of his life, if I brought him to school, and I was able to use all 5 fingers, that was plenty. And so that's a big part of my why every day. And it's been a big part of the way that my life has been revamped and shifted, and to have more freedom to be able to do, those things, which are very important. And then I'm going to start moving at some point. So either I get out of the door earlier and I get to the gym, or, I train at home a lot. Like COVID really kind of helped me to develop a little something at home to where I could always train at home, but I have more stuff at home now that I'm able to work with. And then from there, it's like the foundation's already set. Like, my workout's done for the day, because if not, I'm thinking about that all day if I did it later. Yep. And then I can really focus on everyone else. I can focus on the people that I love, that I work with, you know, and I mean, like I said, they become family and friends. And then, you know, in the evening, we kind of come back together as a family unit again, and we spend time together, and then we wake up and do it again. And so that's pretty much the habits that I've kind of created over time every day. And don't get me wrong, there was, you know, I mean, you've known me for a long time, and I think that there's a point at which you can get really OCD, but you have to continue to evolve yourself. You know, you can continually trying to get better and strive for, like, what's that 1 degree? Like, maybe I'm hot, my water's hot, but what's that 1 degree I can switch on and take that water to boiling?
Wow. Yeah. And so do you, I know how disciplined you are. Are there days that you just don't feel like doing anything?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. So last Thursday, one of my best friends, he lost his brother-in-law, and so the funeral was on Thursday. And what I've noticed is over the past like 3-4 years, and especially what I do in health coaching now, you know, we go to these events sometimes, and people share their stories, and it's their life story. And man, they take you. I mean, you know, we all go through the mountaintops and the valleys, right? And they tend to be in a valley, and all of a sudden it's like they start ascending and start realizing their worth and their value, and you know, they start getting healthier, their mind starts opening up, you know, and it's the mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health just starts to become amplified at that point. And so I've developed these habits and disciplines. And so last Thursday we had this funeral. I woke up Friday morning, and I had like an emotional hangover. And that's what I've kind of noticed over the past like 3-4 years, is that like when I'm really immersed emotionally in certain things, like I get like that, and then I'll wake up the next day and I'm literally groggy and tired, and you know, just kind of wondering about things. Anyway, you know, Friday was one of those days, but you know, the first thing I was yearning to do was to get into the Word. I sat there, I read Psalms, you know, for a while, and I studied a little bit in Ecclesiastes, and I did my prayer meditation. I was like, you know, I just don't feel like doing it today. Like I don't really feel like doing much. And I, you know, Colt and Lindsay, they ended up leaving for school, and I went right to the gym, and it was just autopilot. It was, you know, hot tub, steam room, cold tub, bike, lift. And I was telling somebody, I was like, that is where those disciplines and those habits really come into play. Again, first we make our habits, and our habits make us. Yeah. I didn't feel like doing it, but I did it. My mind was better. My spirit was better. You know, after that, you know, it's just like motion is lotion too. So my body was like, I was literally tired and like groggy, and, you know, like my body just felt better. And I was still a little fatigued for the next couple of days due to that emotional hangover like I was talking about. But yeah, there's some days where get up and don't want to do it. But then also, as I'm getting older, I realize that, you know, I need to also physically take off more too, to let my body recover from what I'm doing so much physically, because I am addicted to that movement. I do love it.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, because you've developed a discipline. There was really a moment for me that you know, that helped me understand that it's not about how you feel, man. It's just what you need to do, and you need to understand what those, you know, I read this book, I don't know if you've read it, called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. It's really a fantastic book, because he basically, what he did for me was he gave that thing, that procrastination or that not wanting to, he gave it a name, and he described it in something that he called it the resistance, right? That, you know, when those kind of things pop into your head, you have to be able to recognize those things. They're there to kill, to steal, to destroy. And you know, it's hard sometimes when you're like, man, I procrastinate and I'm doing this, I don't want to do it. But as soon as he gave it that name and I understood it was a thing, and the way he described it was, you know, it was pretty interesting. He said, you don't think that this air and all this stuff is real. Try getting in your car at 60 miles an hour and rolling your window down and sticking your hand out. He said, it's the spiritual world is real, man. And you know, he basically unpacked this thing, and he gave it the resistance. That's what it's known in my house now, is when it's, you know, maybe in the evening time and I didn't get my workout in the morning, I'll just say, hey, the resistance isn't going to get me today, and I'll get out of my garage and I'll go, you know, knock a great workout at. But it really helped me to be able to understand that this thing and recognize it and give it a name and say, oh, I see you. I know what you're trying to do. And that was a really great inflection point for me, because I was able to understand what it was, instead of it just being this thing of, oh, you're just a procrastinator, you're just lazy, or you put things off, or whatever it was. It's like, no, now that thing actually meant something to me. And that thing meant, when that pops up, it means I've got to go do whatever I can to combat that, right? And so it was an inflection point for me where like a lot of things came together by just understanding that, listen, man, that's what the enemy is here to do. It's here, people that are having a tough time. And I'm sure I want to really get into that. What the world that we live in now, it seems like we're getting more unhealthy, more addicted to things that aren't good for you. The social media, the technology that's always around us. And you look at the world, and the world seems that it's getting fatter, it's getting less healthy, and people are not living as quality of a life. Did COVID, in your opinion, exacerbate that? Or, is the last few years, have you, because Brandt's a life coach, basically what he does, a health coach and a life coach. He has clients and he's teaching them how to go build to have their best life at the end of the day. That's what you're doing. You're helping people unpack and uncover the beauty and the ability within themselves to become the best that they can be. And you do this a lot with a lot of people. And so I think it's interesting to me is, have you seen any shift since you've been doing this, like in the mentality of people and the hopefulness? It seems like the world doesn't have as much hope, man. It's like, I look around at my friends and man, like some of these people at my age are in not good shape, man. They're in bad shape physically. You can tell they're struggling in life. And, do you see this? It seems like it's a growing epidemic almost, Brandt.
It is. So there's a lot of gold in what you just said, very eloquently. So I'll start with COVID. Before COVID, it seems like the world was kind of rolling along as it was, and people were happy, and economy was good. The state of the world, was good to a degree. I'll say, there's always some turmoil in the world somewhere. But when COVID hit, it was fear, right? You talk about that resistance. Well, what do you do when you feel a resistance? Like you said, it's like buffalo, right? They see a storm, they go straight into it. Mm-hmm. They don't go around it. They don't say, oh, what should I do? Should I tiptoe around this? No, they just go straight through it because there's a lot of resistance there too, and it's uncomfortable, but it's the fastest way through that storm, mm-hmm. right? And so that is important. The other thing is as we talk about fear, have you ever read the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill? Mm-hmm. Phenomenal. So he's most known, which is way ahead of his time, but he was known for Think and Grow Rich, which, he wrote, I believe, in the 20s or late teens, right either in or on the edge of the Great Depression. And out of the Great Depression, right, out of this turmoil, out of this, discomfort, if you will, were born so many moguls in industry, mm-hmm. right? And what that did. And so out of the resistance and uncomfortability can come great things. But in Outwitting the Devil, he's having an interview with the devil. And the devil has to answer every question that he asks him. And he asks him point blank, he says, what is your biggest tool for infiltrating the minds and hearts of people? How do you get in there? He says, well, you're going to make me reveal my secret. He says, well, you said I could ask you anything. And he says it's propaganda, right? So that propaganda that people get in their mind, because on the other side of what he named in that book, Resistance, for you is, right, I'm not good enough. I'm a procrastinator. Yep. I'm this, I'm that. And that's that propaganda that the devil is trying to put in your head. And so you see that on a large scale, I think, with COVID, and I think to some degree, rightfully so, even myself and my family, we didn't really know what was going on at the forefront of it. And my wife's like, hey, look, you're still in the gym. And I was like, yeah, I am. And she's like, well, we don't really know what this is. So, now that you've worked and developed this other business, like you have the opportunity to come home, make sure that everybody's safe. Why don't you take that opportunity? Okay. And that's when I was able to delegate. However, I think at that point, everybody was paralyzed.
Yep.
That's what fear does. It paralyzes people and just stops them in their tracks. And that just doesn't stop on that large scale with a thing like COVID and what was going on in the world at the time. But even people are fearful. They're fearful that they're not going to succeed. They're fearful because they have limiting beliefs that were conditioned into them, that they've been given since the time they were a kid. You'll never amount to anything, right? And so that fear paralyzes to where they don't even take the first step to try to even gain momentum. And I think a lot of people were in that place. As time went on and people started to see, again, first we make our habits and our habits make us, it started to really reveal their poor habits. And it started to also reveal the fact that, hey, what is my best defense against this? My health.
Yes.
What can I control? What goes in my mouth and what goes in my brain, right? And so people started to, I think, start to wake up a little bit. And that's when literally, I mean, I had a ton of people that I was working with at that time and still do, but was working with at that time because they started to see this shift and they didn't like where it was going. And sometimes it's the scale, sometimes it's how they feel.
Yeah.
But they started to really see how their habits were not serving them. And so that was a time where, really saw a lot of growth in helping other people to grow and build their life around what matters most. And it was a reset to a degree. And some people kept going in those habits. And so, like you're saying, I mean, as far as it being an epidemic, absolutely. By the year 2030, and this is Harvard and George Washington University, half of our population will be morbidly obese. And that, it hurts me. It hurts me hard. And so part of my mission is to help not allow that to happen and to change the world one healthy habit, one person at a time. Yeah. But think about where that gets us as not just physically. Like we tend to think of morbidly obese as this physical thing, but think about the disease. Yeah. Think about the mental, things that come along with that. I'm no longer as mobile as I once was. Yeah. I'm starting to see this disease show up in my life. And then the mental component to that too, right? Instead of, and again, it's the first few days, 4 days, it's like when a rocket ship is taken off from the Earth. It's going to exhaust most of its fuel within the first 3 to 4 seconds. And it's the same thing with people as they're moving away from bad habits. And that's why what we do in coaching is so important. We connect with those people for those first 4 days. And then after we get them that momentum rolling forward, then we just connect once or twice a week after that because they have that momentum going into that space. And so it's, I mean, you mentioned it, and I see it, I'm about to be 42 in January, and and from that age, even younger now, but all the way up to to your age as well. Like you said, you're seeing these people around you, like they're in pain, and it's not just a physical pain. It's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's financial, and I think that once we can control what goes in our mouth and our brain, and we can start to really become healthy, it really starts to declutter what's going on up there, conscious, subconscious, and superconscious. And now it opens you up to where, the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, and even the financial component. Because once you have all those things in order, everything tends to start working together because you can develop your fullest capacity. I don't even use the word potential anymore because potential, I think, puts a governor on people. Yep. It's capacity, God-given capacity. Like, I mean, think about Navy SEALs, right? Think about what they go through. Do you think that their capacity is much greater than even what they can fathom and imagine, and what they go through budge training and through these missions that they do, and also what they put themselves through because they understand and realize that we're not even tapping into even a fraction of what our greatest capacity is because of comfort. Yeah. Right? And leaning into resistance is uncomfortable, but it's our greatest path to growth.
Yeah. Well, what's the book Angela Duckworth, I think, wrote, Grit? That book, Grit, which is fascinating, man, because it showed me when I read that book, and she kind of unpacked. She kind of did a study, I think, of these really highly skilled, trained military people, and unpacked what was the common denominator that they all had, and it was this grit. And the grit is just the ability to overcome, basically, the ability to not see that wall, and it's such a mental game, man. But to have that mental approach, you got to have your life in order to kind of do those kind of things, man, because it's very difficult for some of these people that have let themselves get so far out of sync, to even wrap their mind around, how do I even get started, man? Like, so I would imagine you have hundreds of success stories of people that, maybe thousands of people that you've worked with. And, what is the biggest challenge, I would imagine, is dealing with people that maybe have gotten into their age a little bit, 30-something, 40 years old, they've let themselves get away. Like, where do you even start with those people, man? It's got to be, is it a slow journey, or do you just dive right in and say, hey, man, this is the plan? Or how does that work with, I've never let myself get that far out of whack to have to, like, I was always within distance to get back in line. But sometimes, man, it's got to be just incredibly difficult for somebody that's 100 pounds overweight to get started, man, huh? It's got to be. It's probably more of a mental game than it is a physical game at that point, huh?
That's it. That's really it. And it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough with yourself first and foremost, to be really clear in your current reality. And that's really where I start with people. It takes them being vulnerable enough to just get on a phone call, to meet me, on a Zoom or in person, to just sit down and really just what I call it is a strategy call. You can call it a health assessment. You know, I'm just having a conversation like this with people. But the first thing that we're going to do is, where are you currently? Where do you want to? Failure is not an option. Where do you see yourself in a perfect world being? Right.
Yep.
And that's where we start. Now I dig into that too, because okay, you want to lose 100 pounds. That's a surface why, right? Well, what is that 100 pounds going to mean to you? You're going to be able to not have to buy two seats on a plane. And I mean, these are things I've heard before.
Wow.
And actually, you know, buckle the seatbelt, bend down and tie your shoes, you know, and not be out of breath. You know, get home in the evening, your kids ask you to go out and shoot baskets with them, and you tell them no because you're just exhausted because of your health. And it's awesome how their life starts to open up so quickly, and and again, it's only 3 or 4 days, and their life changes right there.
Wow.
But it starts with that call. Goals, let's dig into your why. Mm-hmm. Let's go through all your habits, right? Sleep, energy, how much water do you drink? You know, what are you eating every day? We're going to go through all those things and another few things on that list. And then we're going to say, okay, well, here's how we can take the first step in order to help you. And here's how the journey's going to look. Here's how we're going to connect, right? You don't have to go this alone. And it's not just me either. It's, you know, we have a full community of people who, like, you know, yesterday I talked to my friend Pastor Derek, and he's down about 25 pounds in 5 weeks. And he's like, but he's literally, like, I have a working health journal that I, you know, personally started reading, you know, to better help my clients, change my life, change my perspective on health, which was always tied to fitness and performance. And now it's about longevity, brain health, what we call ultra health. But he's like, Brandt, he goes, I mean, literally, he's like, I just thought I was coming here to lose some weight. He said, and now I'm working on my primary and secondary and tertiary choices. I'm like, all right. He's like, I'm stop, challenge, and choosing, right? Like, he's creating space between stimulus and response. He goes, and it's not just with food. He goes, it's also with my family. He goes, you know, when I come inside, if I'm having a conversation with somebody and something starts to rub me the wrong way, he goes, I stop myself, I take 8 breaths. He goes, and then I'm able to fully respond. I'm like, this is change in people's life.
Man, that's
right?
beautiful, brother.
So, and he's somebody too, is like, I don't know if I can do it. And he said, Brandt, before I started with you, he said, I did all these different diets, he said, and I may have lost 4 pounds in a month, tops. He's like, I never dreamed that this would be how I change. He goes, but most importantly, I was like, your quality of life, right? And that's it. And so now it's starting to trickle into relationships. It's, you know, he's a pastor. It's the people that he's shepherding, you know, in life. It's with his own family. It's with his own journey. He's fitting in suits now that, you know, so that's all the things. When you start to see somebody else be successful, that's what it's all about, and their life open up.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that too, because I use this example. So when I met Angelina, you know, she's like a neat freak, like a crazy neat freak. And I remember I was raised with brothers, man, and we just throw shit all over the place, dude, and like leave stuff out. And I'd see her picking up behind me. And ultimately, you know, she's my wife. I don't want her to have to be doing this stuff. And so I got in line and I started to pay attention to these little things, man. And so what I noticed was, when I started paying attention to these little things, inadvertently, it built muscle memory for me that it translated to every other part of my life, you know? And so it's almost like once you start to figure one thing out, then you have the insight to start looking at other things. And so it doesn't just stop there, dude. It becomes, in a good way, it becomes like a train, like it's almost like it's a waterfall, and you look up and it's like, man, you're paying attention to this a little bit better. And now it's like, I leave the house. I can't leave my house. Every door's closed. The house, literally, you can walk in my house anytime you want, and it looks like it's perfect. It's like, what do these people do? And it's because I noticed that little thing made such a change for me in every other part of my life. It's more about, it's awareness, dude, a lot of times. And I think it's, you know, that's what you're teaching people to do, is to look in the mirror. I always say this, dude, that person in the mirror every morning and every night, it is what it is, brother. What I am, who I am, and I did what I did that day, and there is no escaping it, right? And so having that accountability and that awareness of you know, what did you do during your day, and really assess it with a critical view, and not get mad at yourself, but just say, hey, man, just note it, and let's try to change a little bit of what you didn't like today, tomorrow. You know, and every day I fail, it seems like. I get to the mirror and it's like, shit, I messed up here and I did this. I said too many curse words here. But being self-aware and understanding these things to me was another one of those little secret like lessons that allowed me to evaluate. You become good at it, right? You start to, the picture becomes bigger and broader, and you now start to see, you apply these little things that you learn from her. You know, from me not wanting my wife to pick up behind me, because it's like, she's not my mom, she's my wife. That little thing was the catalyst that really changed my life in some ways, dude. And you wouldn't think, it's like, that's ridiculous, Sean, but it was just about paying attention to the details of life, man, and really evaluating and being true and saying, hey, I want to be the best person I can be, not only for me, but for my family, for this. And look, as a byproduct of this rolled over into everything else in my life, and I became more aware of it. So self-awareness has to be one of the number one things that people have to get in touch with. And I wonder, when you're not in a good place, you're looking in that same mirror that I was looking in every day. You can't hide from the mirror. What are these people thinking? You think, like, what are they, you know, I would imagine it's pretty difficult, because when they look in that mirror, they don't really like what they see, you know? And so, you know, I guess them getting started, a lot of times people just don't know where to get started, man, you know? And that's where guys like you come in, where it's like, man, you're just a phone call away, and you can help you get that right mindset to start to correct these things. And I would imagine, dude, some of the stories, it's got to be a very rewarding business that you're in, man, because you see this growth and you see people, you know, achieving their potential, or, you know, their capacity, as you say. And it's got to just be, man, the greatest thing in the world, dude, because I know the way you are. You get joy. This is the joy of your life, man, is that you're helping a human being get the most out of what they can be in life, man.
Yeah, it fills my cup, that's for sure, each and every day. And that place where you're talking about, people, they're limited sometimes by their past. Well, I've tried this, I've done this, right? Or they have that parent or that coach who told them they'd never amount to anything, or they're not good enough, and they just need somebody to believe in them, right? And we'll say, we want to let people borrow our confidence until they have their own.
Yeah.
You know? And that's in anything in life. It's not just in health, you know, like if you were walking with somebody on the journey of, you know, direct mail and all the things you were mentioning in the beginning, right? It's like, when somebody comes in, you want them to be able to borrow your confidence and expertise of the last, you know, 30 years in your time here, of like with Deion Sanders. I was watching one of his reels yesterday. He says, don't let my confidence intrude on your lack of your lack of confidence.
Yeah.
Right? And he goes, I don't wear cologne. He goes, this is my natural aroma of confidence, right? And he does. He has a great confidence. He's a man of faith. But to allow other people to borrow that is key to help walk with them on this journey. And then once they have their own, it's so neat to watch them as you don't remove yourself. You're still there for them, right?
Yeah.
But it's like you can remove yourself enough to where now they're walking on their own and they're doing it on their own. So I think the one thing that stops them are the self-limiting beliefs from their past, whatever that may be, and then also a fear of like, well, what if I don't, right? What if I don't? And so that's where you can lend them your confidence to move forward. And you mentioned that, you know, in your walk, right? And I heard Helen Irwin, she's incredible. Balian is her company, and she does a really good job coaching. She coaches all these like Fortune 500 level companies and CEOs and things like that. She talks about A goals you've done before, B goals you've gotten close but never really got them, but you know you can get them, you know, if you continue to work and do what you need to do. And then there's C goals, which are imaginative goals. And so if we set a C goal, right, and we continue to walk with that goal in mind, we're operating from here. So our mindset is operating where we ultimately want to be. And then as we walk that journey out, you know, it might not be a straight line from here to there. It might, and likely is going to have some peaks and valleys. But then how do you respond to adversity? And that's really the key. And having mentors and coaches, you know, I mean, like I had several throughout the years, but not like an ongoing coach and mentor. And now I have a couple of those too, who, because they're going to see my blind spots. They're going to see, you know, things that I might not be doing real well, or things I could do better to turn that dial up and make that water, you know, boiling, right? And so, but the consciousness and awareness, you know, and continually knowing that, and I guess not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but we're not our thoughts, right? We are pure consciousness. And so we're one of the only, you know, humans are the only ones who can actually like set a futuristic goal, right? Or say, this is where I want to be. But we're also the only ones who can remove ourselves from these thoughts that, like, say, a deer in the woods, right? They just react, and they're living on reaction. Whereas for us, we can actually remove ourselves from that and say, well, I'm not that thought. I'm not that feeling. I'm not that emotion, right? Yeah. And now I'm aware and conscious of that. And then that space is important too. So we say, like earlier, stop, challenge, choose, create space between stimulus and response. You know, why am I feeling this way? The 8-second rule, you know, like Pastor Derek implemented the other day, you know, those kind of things are incredibly important in helping someone to learn those things over time so that they can be aware when they start going down that rabbit hole, or I'm not good enough, or I didn't make a good decision today, so I must be a failure. No, that's not it. It's just, you're just having a moment, and that's okay. And it's okay to have emotions and feelings. And I think sometimes, you know, you mentioned grit. I think, you know, especially as men, like I watch my dad grit through things. And I have a high threshold for pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual pain. I have a high threshold. It's a gift and a curse because, you know, as men, sometimes we think, well, I need to suppress all that. Call it like Dave Blanchard. He's a great guy, personal growth and development, work with Og Mandino, but he calls it stuff it and drive. Like, I'm just going to stuff it down and keep driving forward. But at some point, like we walk around with this big sack of stuff that's happened to us in our life. And it's important to drop the sack, take the stuff out and acknowledge it. Etch it on your heart, because those things that you've been carrying around all your life, you don't think other people are carrying stuff around in that sack. And etching them on your heart is going to allow you to help that person in need, because you've gone, you know what? Awesome. Let me put this right here. Okay. And then now you can help them and say, look, I've overcome this, and you can too. Right. And then there's that relatability where people are like, oh, you're human as well. It's like, yeah, you didn't just get to where you're this disciplined person who trains every day, who picks up, you know, in the household, who operates as that man who wants to be the best husband and father and, you know, shepherd to so many people.
No, it's been a journey.
Right. And that's it. And it's embracing every day and every moment of it.
That's it, man. Yeah. Yeah. And having those top level goals and really knowing what you're capable of. And like you said, you're operating here, but you're really here. But the roadmap is kind of the journey from there to there, right? And if you know where you want to go, I like to talk about this sometimes. It's like having a GPS or having a map. You turn the GPS off, you might wind up on some country road and lost, but all you got to do is turn that GPS, start paying attention to it again, and you get back on track. And so having that place that you want to go, you know where you want to go. It's just the journey. The journey is what life is, and it's the fun part about it, man. Just because I think the learning that I've experienced has always been the blessing is in the lesson, man. You know, I've learned if I'm not failing enough, I'm not pushing hard enough. And so, you know, I'd love to know your thoughts about, you know, doing hard things, challenging things where you have to stretch beyond yourself to do it, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Really, that's to me is one of the keys in life, man, is that are you always pushing up against the boundaries of what comfortable is, right? And getting outside of that, because that's when you come alive, man. Because, you know, it's like I could say the plank. From a financial standpoint, I'm a risk taker, dude. Like I'm rolling the dice every single day. And no matter where I am today, I'm always looking past that. And there's only one way I'm going to accomplish it is with my faith in God at the end of the day. And I call it having one foot on and one foot off. And you know, you take that next step, God's just going to be there. And it's invigorating, man. And so not living a safe life, living in a really kind of adventurous life, man, it keeps us youthful, man. So I'm sure that's part of the things that you guys are training and talking to people about, doing hard things, man, because it allows you to evaluate yourself and what you're made of. It gives you confidence that you can do more hard things, right? It builds on itself.
Right. And I mean, those are wins. Like
wins.
You were talking about earlier, like it's getting those wins, you know, no matter how big or how small, and you celebrate those wins along the way. You don't dwell on them and sit there in them. It's like Tim Grover in his book Winning says. Have you ever read that book?
No.
He was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's trainer, but he goes, you know, winning comes by. As soon as you win the championship, it just comes by, pats you on the ass, and rides off into the sunset, and you're watching the wind just go away, right? Because it's the journey, like you said, that teaches you so much about, you know, about you and about how you respond to adversity. So yes, our comfort zones is where our dreams go to die.
Yeah.
Because our comfort zone is a rut. You think about a rut, like when a car tire's in a rut and you can't quite get out, it's comfortable in the rut. Like that tire always wants to go back down in the rut. It doesn't want to get out of the rut because it's comfortable there. And so people just continually stay in that, and some people get stuck there for life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Where they can never really get out of that rut. And so it's, what can you do different? Like if you're doing what you've always done, you're going to continue to get the same result.
That's right.
So it's like, how can I push myself out of my comfort zone? I was watching like David Goggins' reel yesterday.
Oh yeah.
He was talking about it too. He's like, you got to get your ass out of your comfort zone. You can't, there's nothing good going to come of it. You got to push it out to see what you're made of and push the envelope. And I haven't done triathlon in a couple of years. And, it's something actually yesterday, now that we're talking about it, I started thinking, I'm like, what could I do to really push myself? And I've done a lot of that, the physical stuff. I've done a lot now to stretch like my mental and spiritual, I guess, comfort zones of what I've always known, to continue to evolve in those ways too. So it's always, telling people, look, like you're not going to grow in your comfort zone. What you know right now, what you're doing is where you're comfortable. It's where you're not fearful, right? And I don't know if fear is the right word. Like you said, you're a risk taker, but I think also part of it is knowing that, like a few weeks ago, I was trying to do a few things, and it was like I had these fiery arrows like always being thrown at me and shot at me. And I got to the point where I was walking my dog on the, on our nature trail in our neighborhood, and I literally, like, something happened, like a message or an email came through, and it's kind of another roadblock. And I literally started laughing out loud. If somebody was watching, they probably thought I was crazy. I started laughing out loud, and I just looked up at it. I said, God, I was like, I don't even know why why this is going on right now, but what I do know is that I have your armor on, right? Yep. Like Ephesians, I said, and you have my back. Like, I know you have my back. I'm fully confident in that. And so I think our relationship, with God is so very important to help us, like you said, get through those points of that propaganda that the devil's trying to put in our mind. Like, you're not good enough. You're going to fail again. Yeah. You got to take the step. You got to take the shot.
Yeah, man. And listen, God will... He'll allow you'll run right up against starting to panic, man, and if you just stay the course, dude, I've found that's why nothing bothers me. Money doesn't bother me. Nothing bothers me anymore. I don't focus on any of that stuff because God has showed me time and time again. I've had so many miracles that have happened in my life that it's just, dude, just keep doing what you're doing, man. You're in your purpose. You're doing what you're supposed to do. And everything always works out, man, if you're in your purpose and you keep moving, dude. That's one thing I've learned, man, And
there are miracles every day.
Every day.
And those miracles could be wins. They could be other things that show up in other people's lives. Where you're like, man, but we need to really be aware and conscious of those things as miracles as well, because I don't think a lot of people are, oh, that just happens, or that person just, they don't really necessarily know your journey. They just see you live in, and that's why I think it's also important to share the good and the bad. And
absolutely,
not just the good, because we see that in this Instagram world nowadays, and Facebook's just social media in general, where it's like all the good, and then you can get into comparison as well, where people start comparing. That's another thing that holds people back, is like, well, I'm not Sean, right? Yeah. I'm not Shannon. We're all different. We all see things through a different lens. We all perceive things differently. So it's just, knowing that we're all different, showing the good, bad, and the ugly, because that's going to help people just as much as just showing the good. Sometimes that can debilitate people because they get stuck because they're like, I don't know if I could ever achieve that. It's like, well, let me tell you about my journey and about every little piece and part around it. I'm getting better at that. I haven't been the best because in my own mind, it's like I don't ever want to put out negative things, but truth isn't negative, it's truth.
Exactly.
And that truth, again, can help someone to overcome, because out of that truth came a certain confidence, because of overcoming that obstacle, overcoming that adversity to become who you are now. And so by sharing that, it's going to create this bridge between, like, oh man, well, it's vulnerability, right? It's like, oh, well, he was vulnerable enough to share that. Like, maybe I could share, some of my deepest fears and concerns with him, and he would understand.
When you become confident, you almost lead with those things, man, because it eliminates a barrier with people, because they're looking at this picture of you and saying, man, this guy's got his shit together, dude. Like, he is in shape. He's got a great family, man. His walk is a great walk. Look at what he's doing for people. But, man, there's a lot of stuff that happened from the starting point to right now, and probably still happens, man. And, yeah, being vulnerable to people allows them to realize that, hey, I'm not in this boat by myself, man. Like, this is not like a unique thing to me, because I think that's what happens sometimes is people get in their own head, and it's like, dude, I'm just a I'm a screw up, or I can't do anything, or everything I try to do. Listen, man, there's been patches in my life where everything I did was wrong, dude. Everything I did was wrong. Like you go down a certain path and it's like, God, man, geez and Pete's, I just need some kind of little victory. But if you just keep on the path, man, it just shows up, and it's like you learn to. I am most comfortable when, like, I have no idea. I have no idea where it's going, man. You know, it's like this is invigorating, dude. Right. You know, and I don't think that's normal, dude, for some reason. But I enjoy being there because I've been there so much in my life. I've been such a risk taker my whole life that it's just like, dude, that's when I feel in my best element, dude. As soon as I start to get my hand on things, it's like, it's what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I think that's just, you know, it takes time sometimes, but once you realize that you wake up from those hardships and there is a new day and the sun does rise, it just changes everything, man. It allows you to live a carefree, I don't give two shits about anything, dude. I'm telling you, man, I don't care. I literally come in every day and my number one goal is to have fun. I want to have fun. I'm not promised tomorrow, so I'm going to take today and have as much fun. I've surrounded myself with people who, you know, think the same way and look at life the same way. So I'm immersed in that all the time. And I think that's another good lesson to people, man, is that in this journey, I had to eliminate some people out of my life because, you know, you're either adding to my life or subtracting to my life. And not that they're not my friends, but I just stick my toe in and duck out. I stick my toe in and duck out. I don't immerse myself with those people. So I think that's another lesson maybe for people is that look at they say show me the six people you're closest with and I'll show you, you know, ultimately where you're going to wind up in life. And it really is the case. And we've talked about this quite a lot here. It doesn't have to be people that you know face to face. Some people might not have the greatest circle of influence. But guess what? The web allows you to go connect with people like you. Go find people online that are aligned with the way you think, and they can help you. It's really about the people who know how to think the best are the people that are the most successful. How do you learn how to think the best? By educating yourself and by learning and having this insatiable appetite for learning. We kind of unpack that on one of them. What is the number one quality of entrepreneurs that at the end of the day is an insatiable appetite to learn? And I hear you, all the books that you're reading, which I'd love to get your top 10 list, and we'll put this at, you know, Shannon on the in the notes on the podcast, because listen, those 10 books can change people's lives if they dive into them, dude, just like they've probably had such a great impact on your life. So being able to know, hey, maybe there's not a Brandt in your market, but there are these books or these people online that you follow. And, you know, listen, Joe Rogan's podcast, it's fun to listen to, but man, when you take some of the guests that he's had, like Andrew Huberman, who's, you know, the physical performance guy at Stanford, he's supposedly like the foremost guy in the world. I've learned so much from this guy. It's unbelievable, man. Just the resources are there for people to learn. You just got to go find them, man. And sometimes, you know, maybe we can feed them up some of these resources and it'll help people, dude, because I'm sure that in your coaching business, that's got to be a part of it, man, where you're recommending people to listen to, books to read that are going to help people get a better perspective of the world we live in. Because ultimately, when you see the picture and you understand it, now you're able to operate and move in it a little bit better.
Sean, you talked about Think and Grow Rich, which is my favorite book, and we posted about it on our Instagram before by Napoleon Hill.
Oh, yeah?
It was funny when you said that.
Yeah. That's, I'm going to have to get that other book too. You were talking about the devil book.
Yeah, Outwitting the
That
Devil.
was really good.
It's incredible. I did that on audiobook. It was absolutely incredible. I still go back and listen to them because there's just so much. And I got Think and Grow Rich on audiobook too because it's so rich and again his wisdom, and he's so way before his time. But it's these fundamental yet profound like tenets that if we live by them, it's amazing at what can flourish out of that. You know, and you talk about operating in this space where you don't give a shit about anything in the world. And the reason is because I know you, and you have such a strong faith too, but like operating in that space, it allows you to create with the creator, right? Like, and that's part of every day, you know, when I wake up, I'm watching the sun come up, like before it comes up, as it starts to get light and as it comes up, and know that like I am able to create with the creator. every day. And he's creating through us too, you know, and not only just through us as a vehicle and as a vessel, but how that works into other people's lives too. So I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago, and it's one of the foremost leaders in communication and leadership and you know, and just, you know, communication, nonverbal communication as well. And you know, with her, she was just talking about how you have the ability when you walk into a room to influence it. And, you know, it could be negatively. You could say one negative thing, and if there's 20 people in the room, that can just spread like wildfire. Whereas if you walk in with a smile and you walk in with positivity, how that can change. And it doesn't mean don't be real and vulnerable. There are things that are going to come up in your life that, you know, that you also need to share. And it's just in how you share it and how you communicate it. Or, you know, if you're leading a team, like how you come in and ask a question is so important. You know, is there a negative connotation to it, or are you focused on the growth aspect of that, you know, in there as well? And then, you know, talking about like learning, being a lifelong learner is important. As of late, I've read and listened to a couple things too, in that in the personal growth and development space, sometimes that's actually like we have to learn and apply. We have to learn and take action. Because a lot of times people can use personal growth and development as a crutch to just operate in that space and not go apply it and take the action. So it's you know, taking what we learned and then going out and actually applying that, and then, you know, mentioning just healthy surroundings. That's actually one of I never pinpointed this, like always in my mind. I didn't articulate it the right way, but something we teach in our program is healthy surroundings. And so, you know, those top 5 people you hang around in your life. And again, they're people who you may have known all your life, and they might be friends to the point where they're like family, but you may not spend as much time with them. And I think those things too, depending on your life path and where you're at, start to self-sort themselves. Right?
They really do.
You start finding yourself around more spiritually healthy people, or more, you know, people who are healthy and health conscious in their life. And what that starts to do is it starts to develop and build this healthy bubble around you. It's like a protective layer.
It is.
And it's not just around you. It's around the ones you're raising up, right? It's around, you know, the people who are closest to you as well. And it's cool to see how those influences then start to take shape in their lives as well, and not just your own. And you can kind of, and you probably sit back sometimes and go, man, thank you. Like, this is really, dude, it's really neat what you're doing and how you've done it in my life.
Yeah, it's amazing. And listen, you know, when you wake up every day, you know, and you look at your life in 24-hour kind of like compartments. Hey, I got today. What is today going to be? And who am I going to interact with? How am I going to behave? How am I going to pour into their life? And then what are they going to give to me too? You start to make a little bit different decisions than you would if you weren't looking at it like that, right? Negativity, people that complain a lot, all backbiting. Man, when you get to a certain point, those things almost become repulsive to you. You know, you can't even be in the same place as those things because it just gives you such a bad feeling, man. Like, why are we doing this? This is such wasted energy. But I think a lot of times this is what happens, man, is people are, you know, if they're unhappy with their own life, they're complaining about everything, they're bitching about everything. And you know, listen, encouragement, positivity, hopefulness, all of those things, you know, those are the people that you want to be around because they're going to feed that and you're going to feed them. And you know, the choices that you make are the people that you interact with a lot. I can't tell people how important that is. And that's why it's important, you know, for people to be able to know that they can reach out to someone like you, man. And so what does a typical engagement look like? I've always been fascinated. I've never had a life coach or a health coach before, just because I took it upon myself to go and figure this out on my own. Not that I don't need it. It would probably be helpful for me to have those kind of things, but I've resisted it a little bit, quite frankly, dude, just because it seems to me that that's my responsibility to do that, right? But you know, not everybody is like that. So, you know, how like, what does a typical engagement look like when someone hires you, and what is your approach, and how do you go about things? And you know, before we finish this today, you'll tell everybody how to get in touch with you and how to reach you on social media and all. But what does that kind of look like? You know, you're in a bad spot. You're not happy with your life. You're looking for a Brandt Quick to reach out to. You know, what does that look like? You know, how does that all work?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing you touched on a couple of times, personal responsibility, and that doesn't mean that you have to be fully competent in what you're pursuing, right?
Sure.
But personal responsibility is saying, hey, look, it's on me to make the right choices and decisions, and we're all faced with those each and every day. And so taking personal responsibility sometimes is reaching out to an expert, reaching out to somebody. Like in the marketing space, I don't really know much about it other than like rogue marketing on social media.
Yeah.
So, if I was wanting to do something in that space, I would call you,
Yep.
and knowing and being vulnerable enough to say, look, I don't know this, right, and put it in your hands and lean on your confidence until I was able to get it and make it automatic, make it into a habit.
Yep.
And so, so basically, I connect with people in various different ways. I mean, sometimes it's in person at a social event, or they ask me a question and we just start talking and things like that. But wherever the conversation starts, a lot of times it's usually on social media, or people who know me will, reach out, text, call, email me, or they'll, message me through social media. And then what we do is we set up a strategy call, which generally lasts anywhere between, depending on the call. It could last 15 minutes. It could last 45. It just depends on the person, the questions they have, the dialogue. But again, it's just like, where are you currently? Let's dig into your goals. Where do you see your future self? What does that look like? Why? Right? Develop that big why for them, because that's really what's going to help them through the tough times. I always tell people, look, it's a simple process. It really is. It's been around for a number of years, in terms of the process to get healthy, or, to live your best life and become your best self. But it's not always easy. There are going to be times where you're going to be tempted. There's going to be times where you may be in a place where you don't need to be in those surroundings, right? And what are the strategies that you could shift in order to help you with that? So it starts with that initial phone call to see if we're a right fit, if our relationship, is right for one another. And if it is, then at that point, there's some different barriers of entry, in coaching and how we do things. I mean, anywhere from like, you truly want to become your best self, but you do need to lose a good bit of weight, to those people who are like, kind of already in the fitness space where they might just be, trying to outwork the fork a little bit too much. And so it's maybe dialing things in a little bit more for them. And then all the way to like executive coaching, where somebody has like, they are personally responsible. And they have some really good habits, but it's just, again, tweaking those. And that's what's helped me the most, is really like tweaking those little dials to say, okay, well, your water was hot, now it's boiling. And then maybe the water gets hot again and it's like, what am I doing wrong? Oh, thanks for that recommendation. Boom, let me dial that back up, or focus on this for a couple weeks, get that habit going again. So, once I engage with people, it just depends on their level of engagement. But generally, the day before we start, we're going to hop on the phone and do a launch call or a kickoff call and say, okay, do you understand where we're going, why you want to go there, and then do you understand the process of how it's going to get you there?
It's all documented. Is all this documented? Like, is it in like they're following like a timeline in specific things and all?
Yeah. I mean, like, let's say somebody on the weight, they have a
yeah,
weight,
on the weight
they
stuff.
want to become their best self, and that's what happens. But they have to get healthy first.
Yep.
So what we do is we connect the day before on their, we call their launch call. It's generally a 5 to 10 minute call just to kind of launch them off, and that's after that initial call. And then there's some, so initial call, and then in between that, there's some information that I'm going to send to help prep them for their journey. It's not like all of a sudden we just get started, right? I mean, we do and we don't, right?
Yep.
And then the day before, we're going to get on a launch call with them. The first 4 days that they start, again, because that gravitational pull toward those bad habits is going to be its strongest within those first 3 to 4 days. But it's neat, the science and what we do. We're backed by NIH, Johns Hopkins, LSU. So we know that by about day 3, 4, like, you're going to be in a mild fat burn and better sleep, energy levels go through the roof, and mental clarity is at an all-time high.
Wow.
And generally people start on Mondays, so that, because sometimes weekends can be challenging for people and their decisions and choices based on their environment and things they normally do. So basically by Thursday, Friday, like, they're feeling so good that it gives them also this extra little nugget that I don't want to mess this up. I feel so good. Right?
Yeah.
I'm seeing things so much different through a different lens. And so with that, from then we usually go to once to twice a week check-ins. But that's the in-person. The other things that I do, that I'll send a weekly newsletter with recipes, with tips. It's mental, about mental health, emotional health.
Gotcha.
Different things like that, and then some inspirational stories and stuff. And then there are other support tools we have. Like, we have a community Zoom we come to, sometimes once or twice a week. It just depends. And people, those are all options for people. But there are all these support tools that we have. We have a support group on Facebook where, people can ask questions. They can search the page. They can look up, our lean and green recipes, where those are done for us by the Culinary Institute of America, and they're amazing. Like, they're gourmet, healthy meals.
Because the community must be a big deal, huh, man? The community helps each other, I would imagine, big time, huh?
Yeah, it's so our 4 components that really drive the science for people's long-term success, and the people we see tap into these are the ones that are most successful for life. People who come in and treat it like a diet, that's exactly what it's going to be for them. And they are generally the yo-yoers and no offense if you're a yo-yoer, it's
right.
just, you have to make a decision whether you want to make this your lifestyle or whether you want to continue that vicious cycle. I forgot what the question was.
Just that you were going to talk about the 4 components.
The 4 components.
Yeah.
So having a coach, our awesome community, which is coaches and clients, so that you can actually ask, questions. You can engage with people outside of just your coach, which is really cool. The Habits of Health system is that working health journal I was talking about. There's there's also a book and resource it's called The Habits of Health, but it's all the science, right? So the journal is more interactive. It's you being asked questions, by our co-founder, Dr. A, who's phenomenal. And again, that changed my life and my perspective on health. And then we also have like a guide, which is just easy to follow. And then there is that structured nutrition plan, which looks different for different people. People who have a big weight loss journey to go on, they're going to be on our weight loss, that weight loss start. And then other people who just, maybe they have 5-10 pounds to lose, but they're really looking to dial it in. I'll call it like our Get Lean program, which is designed a little bit differently. Those are the 4 components. I'll tell you the 5th component is really coaching and other people stepping into that role to really pay it forward. And that, you're 5 times more likely to remain on your health journey if you become a coach. And people say, well, I don't have the expertise you have, or, it's like, no, but you have the walk. And you don't need to have expertise to be able to walk with somebody on this journey. I'll help you with all that.
Wow.
Right? All the back end stuff. And that's all I'm doing is pointing people to these massive tools of empowerment that they have. And so that's all I am really as a guide. I'm just guiding them to tools. And the neatest part about it is that what I used to do in the gym, there are people who are very personally responsible. They took care, probably about 10% of people would actually like eat right outside the gym, sleep, dial in their other habits, and they'd come see me 2 to 3 times a week and expect that to make all the difference in the world. And so it was almost like unknowingly and not really trying to, but enabling to them, because it's like, oh, well, I do this so I can go do all this. It's like, no. We need to dial all this in. And so now it's empowering people, because once they may ask me a question, I'll say, why don't you go to element 4 of the life book, Building a Healthy Mindset? Or, if they're stress eating or they're having these reactions based on emotions like I used to do, and I'd say I still don't do them every once in a while, but I'm more aware of it. I can point them like, go to element 23, which is managing your emotions, right? So then they go in there and they look at that, and then we can connect around that. What did you find out? What did you learn? What can we implement to really help you to move forward and really grow in those areas? And so when they're helping to walk with other people through that as well, it helps keep them accountable, and they have the ability to, I've seen those people have the most long-term success out of anybody.
Wow, man. Wow, that's interesting, dude. So these life hacks, dude. So it's all these little life hacks, it seems like, and I noticed one, and I'd love to get your perspective on it, but, one of my goals this year, because you talk about reacting out of emotion, there was a handful of times a year that something would happen in my business or something, it was something really negative that would happen. Because when we make a mistake, dude, it's very unforgiving, man, especially with direct mail. Once it's printed and out, you can't pull it back like a digital ad. And so I would lose my cool, maybe, I don't know, once a month, once every couple of months. And it really bothered me. And one of the times I lost my cool, a great employee of ours, it was in a group setting. I lost my cool, got short with somebody, and like the girl, it breaks my heart still to this day. She wound up quitting. It had such an effect on her. And so one of my goals this year was, I said, I want to go a whole year without acting out of emotion. And I did this simple thing. I basically made a promise to myself. So when I was saved on April 26, 2004, at my sister's wedding is when I gave my life to Christ. I was making a lot of money. My family was in turmoil with my brothers. I was fighting with them. And I literally, at her reception at the Ritz-Carlton, I got on my knees and said, God, if you'll give me the strength to go love on my brothers right now and allow me to go repair that relationship, I promise you, no matter what, you'll never know another day in my life, whether I'm rich, whether I'm poor, whether I'm happy, whether I'm sad, I'm gonna be this same person, right? And so I realized that I made that commitment, and I've never gone back on that commitment. So when this year happened, I made that same commitment to myself. And what I found out is that if you really make a commitment to yourself, you can't lie to yourself. You can't tell yourself a lie. So when I etched that in stone and I said, I'm not going to do this whole year, I haven't done it. I'm almost a year, and I haven't had an emotional outburst in a year. And I'm wondering, is it that simple sometimes where you can make a commitment to yourself? Because what I've kind of gathered out of it, because this has happened quite a few times now, is you can't tell yourself a lie. If you really believe what you're telling yourself, you can't lie to yourself. You can't, you believe what you tell yourself, because why would you lie to yourself? So I'm wondering, is that just something that just worked for me, or is that something that, that you've seen work before in other cases? Because I find it amazing that it's that simple. And now I apply it to everything that I want to do in my life. I apply the same thing, and it works every time. So could it be that simple?
It can be for some people, because
it's like if you really mean it, like if you're committed to it, like I'm not just saying it, I'm saying this is what I'm going to do.
With no propaganda in your mind.
No propaganda.
And that's the thing, is that some people they will verbalize and say what they're saying, but in the back of their mind they go, well, I don't know if I can really do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could really go for a year, right? Whereas, and there are certain people in their mindsets and certain things where, like you, where they're like, April 26th, right, 2004, where you said, this is it.
That's
right?
it.
This is it for me. And
yeah.
It's this line of, this profound line, you draw in the sand, and you're like, earlier this year, where you're like, this is it for me. This is what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of, like, my wife says that sometimes too. She'll be like, you and like your dad, like when y'all make a decision, like you make a decision and you're all in and you don't waver. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's it. But some people, they don't think like that. You have to help them. And that's where other people being able to lean on your confidence in certain instances, or a coach's confidence, until they can remove that, because you're ultimately the voice of reason and righteousness in their ear, as opposed to the devil and the evil one, in the back of their mind, infiltrating with that propaganda and the self-limiting beliefs and those kind of things. So, you made your decision and that was it, and you haven't gone back on it, and that's awesome, by the way.
Yeah, dude. I just find it interesting, man, that these little things that are so simple, but you kind of unpacked it a little bit. Yeah, you can't have any doubt when you say it. Like, there can't be any out. Like, there's no out for me. There's no, well, you just didn't. You kind of did it one or two times. Like, there was no out. It's either I don't do it or I fail. Is that kind of thing, And maybe that's drawing the line in the sand kind of thing.
It's you operating from that place. It's you operating from that place of cleaning up, when you grew up in the messy household with the boys. Right?
Yeah.
And now you just made that decision. You said, no, this is who I want to be.
Yeah.
And even though I'm not there yet, like, I'm operating there the entire time.
Exactly. Well, my brother, dude, listen, man, I think that's a great way to kind of close this out, dude. It has been a pleasure. I learned a lot of stuff today too, just so you know, man. I learned a bunch, dude. It was this was fantastic. I think this is going to be super helpful for a lot of people too, man. Hopefully a lot of people watch this. But why don't you tell everybody, listen, I highly recommend Brandt Quick. If you're in a spot in your life where you need help in any aspects, man, you can see spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, if you're trying to get out of a rut, sometimes you need to lean on someone who can kind of help you get started on that journey. And this is a great place to start. So I can tell you from MarketingBox and from Sean Burst, I highly recommend Brandt. Brandt, why don't you tell everybody how they can reach you, how they can get in touch with you on social media and follow you. And listen, he's a great follow. He's an encourager. That's what I've always realized about you, man. You encourage people. You have a kind word. Walking by you don't have your head down. You're telling people hello as you go by. He's a great person to connect yourself with if you're struggling in any way at all. So listen, you have my 100% my confidence, man. If I decide one day to get over myself and have some type of coach, I don't think I would look any further than you. But man, why don't you tell everybody how they can reach and get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. It's reciprocal mentorship, though. We learn from each other, right? When we get to a certain point. So, but at Be Quick Fitness, which will be on Twitter, on Instagram, Brandt Quick on Facebook. If you want to look me up there, and then I have have some other business pages. But that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me, and you can send me messages through there, and I can link up with you, get your number, and we can have a free strategy session. Those first calls that we do are completely free of charge. It's just again just seeing where you're at and seeing how we can help you and see if the relationship is a good fit in what we do.
Yeah. Well, let's go, people. Hey, we provided you the resource. If you're struggling, figure it out. Pick up that phone, reach out to him, and you got help standing by, man. But it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure catching up with you, my brother. Love you, man.
You too, man.